Okay, YouTubers, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV. Now today, unlike usual, we're looking at a different part of Gale Crater, and this is southern Gale Crater. And this image is ESP 062317174, okay? And this is merged RGB, so it's red, green and blue, this area, but the other side, the other two sides of the image are in black and white, okay? But that's good, and what I've done here is I've enhanced the contrast to make the structures stand out, because a lot of these images are either too dark or too pale, and we want to see the actual shapes and the topography and details. If you push the contrast, that usually helps, and here it has done quite well. Now that's of course these fan material, okay? Now that's a typically strategically vague explanation from NASA, and when you look at a lot of these so-called dunes here and deposits on the ground, it's really weird. And now these are supposedly sand dunes, okay? Although it doesn't actually say that in the description at all on the page. And if you look at them up close, I'll show you with the magnifier here, they're extremely angular, like structures, rather than actual sand dunes. What these look like to me, some of them at least, are actual buildings with sand that's blown up against them, okay? Actual structures. Look at these angles here. Perfect straight lines and steps. And then we've got the sand that's kind of blown up against it here above, right? Now, these are all over this area. In fact, the whole area, when I zoom out, is absolutely littered in them. Now, I'm not saying all of these are actual intelligent structures. What I'm saying is, I think some of them are. Now, the problem is, I do actually think that the Martians, in the past, when this area may have been heavily populated, there were people living in this crater. I can guarantee you that. But I'm not sure how many of them are left now. Not very many, I would imagine. Now, I do actually think, as I've shown before, that the Martians were building structures to look like natural geological formations. And they were also using the natural geological formations to build structures out of. In other words, they were moving into areas like this, which had useful geography that could be easily modified and dug into and modified into bunker type houses, underground dwellings, and also surface dwellings, okay? Now, I do wonder whether they deliberately built some of their structures to blend in. In other words, they were semi sort of camouflage structures, either underground or on the ground, made to look like natural structures. This is possible, especially when you have a civilization that has been bombed from above with nuclear weapons. Now, if you wanted to not draw too much attention to yourself, it would be conducive for the population to build structures that look natural from the air when they're scanned or photographed from the air. And that may be a partial explanation for what we might be seeing here. Because basically what we have these dunes, so-called dunes, right, or fan material as NASA calls it, but they're too sharp. Now, if you look at some of these diagrams I've got here of dunes on Earth, now, I do understand that the conditions are different in Gale Crater and on Mars because there's less gravity, that the air pressure is much lower, which means that even though the winds are very strong, they don't have a great deal of effect like they would on Earth because the air pressure is too low. But it still moves sand around, and it still move dust and sand around, and then there are regular sandstorms, but the severe sandstorms are about once every 4 years on Mars. But on one part or the other of Mars, there will be sandstorms regularly, but the really big ones that are planet-wide only happen about once every 4 years. What we have Barkham dunes, we have linear dunes, parabolic, transverse, star, and Barkham dunes becoming transverse. So we've got a mixture here. Now, the ones on Mars are closest to this, the parabolic dunes, like a cross between these here and these here, right? But that doesn't really explain it, because these are way too angular. In other words, if these were normal parabolic dunes, then these would be rounded. They wouldn't be straight, and they wouldn't be as angular on top. These actually look more like structures to me. Now, I could be wrong, and I'm sure a lot of them are just dunes. But look at these angles here. We have finite, perfect, straight angles and points here. And this isn't the only, I mean, these are absolutely everywhere, and they're all kind of equidistant as well. They're all roughly equidistant. They're not perfectly equidistant, but a lot of them are. They're extremely alike. It's almost like there was, say there was about 10 of these dunes in a row. It's almost like someone's got them, got an area, and copied it and pasted it over the whole area. I mean, they're so similar in configuration, these so-called dunes here, that they actually look like they're copied and pasted. And one of the best areas is up here. Now, if you look at these are round, these are a mixture, okay, where you've got some that are very sort of curved and rounded, and some that are very pointed here, right? And these down here, for some reason, are much more pointed and longer, but of course that depends on the actual shape of the ground. But what I'm struggling with here is the fact that these are so pointed, whereas the ones on Earth are curved, like an arch shape. These are like pointed arches. And I do wonder whether a lot of these are actually structures that just happen to have sand that's blown up against them from this direction and then this direction, okay? Because what's probably happened here is the sand's blown from the south here into these shapes, okay? That's what happens on Earth. But the ones on Earth are never this uniform or pointed. They are uniform to a certain extent, but they're not pointed like this. Now, I wonder whether these are actual structures. I mean, look at these angles here, perfectly straight lines. Some of these are absolutely ruler straight like that. And why would that be? If these were just dunes, they wouldn't be straight. You wouldn't have all these straight points. They would be much more curved and natural looking. Now, there are a lot in the area that do look more curved and natural looking. And some of them are up here, like here. What does it say here? Yeah, more natural looking ones here. So these do look like dunes, okay? Because they're more random, and a lot of them are sort of stretched out, and they're more curved on the top. And if you use the magnifier and look at the points on them, you can see they're sort of curved, right? Now, these look like dunes to me, right? Curves, right? That looks like it should. But when you come over here and look at these are pointed. So what's going on here? These look more like structures. When you actually think about what you're looking at and think, well, why would they be so pointed? Like this. Okay? Now some of them are absolutely almost razor sharp. Like these up here. And I mean, you could go on looking at these for days and days and wonder about what's going on here, but I do wonder whether some of these are actual structures that are built to resemble actual dunes from above, i.e. camouflaged. I could be wrong, but if you look at the angular shapes of these, they seem absolutely too perfect, really, to just be dunes, because they're too angular. And there's also other features in the area which I thought were rather strange, like square holes in the ground, like this one. Now, there's another one here. And when you start looking, a lot of these craters and holes in the ground, now not all craters, some of them are just depressions, like this, are actually square or hexagonal. Okay? There's a hexagonal one here, there's a square. And once you start looking around, you'll see that some of these areas actually look more like eroded structures like we have here. Okay, if you look at this now, initially it looks random, but when you start looking into the shapes here, we've got squares and diamond shapes. Now, what this could be is a buried city area here, and the sand has filled in most of the gaps in between the ruins, and what we're seeing it as is a kind of a load of sand dunes and depressions in the ground, okay? But a lot of these depressions are square. So I do wonder whether this here, this area, is actually a buried city area here, because basically there's lots of squares here. They look kind of rounded off, but this is what happens when you have buried structures. This is what they look like when they're buried in sand. You don't see sharp edges, you see kind of rounded square shapes, all in rows, okay? And that's what we have. I will take some clips of these and put them in at the end as well, and I'll darken this up and show you what I mean. Because if I show you this in negative and darken it up and stuff, and play with the contrast, it will really pop out and you'll see what I'm on about. And it's weird because you have more natural looking dunes here, and then you have nearby, you have some which are very sharp. And there's lots and lots of square holes in the ground, which I think are actual structures that are buried. And you have loads of weird features, like this rectangular hole in the ground here. You have a rectangle there. And when you look at them with a magnifier, it's just like, well, hang on a minute. It's like a rectangle, but it's got the corners kind of angled like that. It's almost like a coffin shape, this one. How weird is that? So that may be a structure, and I think a lot of these are actual structures, because we do know there are buildings in the area north of here, on Mount Sharp, on the lower slopes of Mount Sharp, and to the north of that in Gale Crater as well, as I have shown before, including pyramids, domes, huge long barrow kind of like bunker structures. A lot of them look like modified natural structures with windows and holes in them and doors and that kind of thing, entrances I should say. But basically a lot of this stuff, once you start looking at it, you'll think, well, hang on a minute, there's another one here. Another square crater. I mean, square craters don't happen. Okay, sometimes you would get one or two that may look a little bit square, but there's loads here. Loads of these are square, and they're sort of overlapping a lot of them. I think these are structures, quite large some of them, and I think they're just buried in sand, and the reason they look like they do is because they're buried. If you were to come along here with a massive giant leaf blower, you could blow a lot of this sand and material away, and you would probably find that there's a whole town here, or a whole city, or at least part of one, okay? Basically, you have to take into account that a lot of these are probably natural, and it can be explained by normal wind processes with sandy material, okay? But when you look at the angles of some of these, up close, they're extremely pointed, and some are quite extraordinary. Up here, there's a whole bunch of them which are very, very pointed, and this area here particularly, they were so perfect. And I know there's different gravity and different things at play here, but then why are there square depressions in the ground nearby? There's another one here, there's another one here. A lot of these craters are hexagonal. Now there are explanations for that, that some people have. There's something up here as well. There's some very angular ones here, and these were really nice up here. Absolutely mental how perfect they are. So are these structures with sand that's blown up against them, or are they just dunes? I think a bit of both here. I actually think some of these are actual structures, and when you look at some of the topography, you can see what look like cave dwellings and stuff in the side of some of these areas. And there's, in some of these depressions in the ground, if you look carefully, they've got, there's another square one there, they've got what look like caves around the edge. And here it is. So you've got this kind of hexagonal shaped depression or crater, whatever it's supposed to be, and then you have a square or rectangular area cut out of it and another square here. So these are buildings. I'm absolutely sure that some of these are buildings. I'm not saying all of them are, but there are details like these squares which I don't think are natural. And there's a rectangle cut into the side of this one next to another rectangle there, right next to it. So this looks like some kind of cave dwelling that's been cut into the side of this crater area here. And I'm sure there are many more that I haven't found yet in this area, but this part here is what I think is an actual town right here. And it stretches right across to here into this coloured area. And you can see more squares here. There's another one there, another one here, but they're rounded off because they're buried. We can see a square here, another one here. These are buried ruins, I'm pretty sure of it. And it's very, very unlikely. The chances of Mother Nature creating loads and loads and loads of square structures next to each other, or having square meteors hitting the ground and causing loads of square craters, the chances of that are billions to 1 against. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculously low odds for that to actually happen. So I really do think that some of these must be buried structures, similar to some of the things we've seen up on the mountain that I've shown in my last 2 videos. But we've got different material on the ground here, and the sand has drifted over most of it and covered it up. But it does look very interesting. And these were my favourite ones here near the middle here. There will be links to all this, by the way, that you can check out in the description. Like I said before, check out this magnifying glass I'm using. It's a Chrome extension and it's called Magnifying Glass Hover Zoom. So if you go into your Chrome settings and then extensions and then type it in and look for it, you can download it. It doesn't take up any memory really, and it just attaches up here, and it's really good because it doesn't pixelate at all. It just shows the image. It doesn't actually hover over the screen and enlarge the pixels. It just enlarges the image, and it kind of smooths it out slightly in the process to stop it pixelating, which is really good. But look at these angles here. I really don't think that is a dune. I think this is a structure, particularly this area here. I think that a lot of these are structures that have sand that's blown up against them. I don't think they're just dunes. I don't think they're natural parabolic dunes or transverse or Barkhan or whatever. There are examples of all these in the area, and some of them are a mixture, but I really don't think all of them are. I really do think that some of these are actual structures that resemble dunes on first glance, but when you look at them up close, they're way too good and way too angular. These ones here look good as well. They're way too straight, they're way too pointed, and we have perfect edges here on some of these. Absolutely stunning. So really cool, this one. So I'll call it a day there. So links below in the description as usual. Check this out. I mean, some of these even look like bridges and stuff, and some of them are kind of double, like this one here. It's kind of double layered. I mean, it's really odd. And there's another sort of rectangle here. I mean, they're everywhere. Once you start looking at these structures, well, there's a huge dark rectangle there, okay? And there's a squarish one there. I mean, what the hell's going on? I really don't think all of this is natural. And when you turn the contrast up on these images, like I've done here, there's another square there, just here, in there, see? Very strange, guys. I think this is another city, but this is very different to the stuff we've seen in the north end of Gale Crater. Check out the links to these and have a look. I've got some other images as well, and plenty of examples of these different types of dunes here and how they're formed, and it explains which direction the wind comes from to make them. Okay, so this is really cool stuff. But the ones on Mars don't quite conform to this, not just because of the conditions and the low gravity, but because I really don't think all of them are actual dunes. As I've said before in past videos that show what supposed icy dunes or frosty dunes, they often have structures right by them, or they are over structures that are built either in crescent shapes or in sort of pointed linear shapes. and the sand drifts up against them, making them look like just dunes. But there's a reason why the dunes have formed like they have. It's because there are structures here that the dunes are blown up against. You can actually see where the sand's blown up against them here. All right? So it's not quite as simple as NASA may want you to believe a lot of this stuff. I don't think. And there's some very complex stuff going on here, and not all of it's natural. So thanks for watching, everybody. I will see you soon.